John, this is very interesting because I see a logic in what you're saying, right? You would possibly agree with me. Anybody who hears this logic would agree with what you just said, that the real contribution is in doing the diagnosis and the solution. But what is preventing enterprise architects to do this? Typically, let's say what happens is you're working on an assignment, you identify a problem, and say you got 3 months to solve a problem, right? So what it looks to me right now is that the reason why we are not doing it, I'm looking at that possibilities, right? So let's say I got 3 months to do something, and I understand that analysis and diagnosis is important, but now what happens is it takes out of 12 weeks, I'm actually spending 11 weeks in creating the models, and I'm left with just 1 week to do the possible diagnosis. Now, can you tell me that if I use your framework, right, do you think this will be any different? Can I save time in creating the models and spend more time in doing the diagnosis?
I like the illustration you're using, because if you spend, I mean, 3 months, you spend 12 weeks or whatever the number of weeks is in creating the composite snapshot. You got one possible, well, first place, if you only are describing the anatomy, it's only, you're only describing what exists. You're not even proposing any alternative solutions. You got one picture.
Right.
And, basically you can implement based on that one picture, you're going to get just one point in time solution. So, yeah, and the reason why it takes you 12 weeks it's 12 weeks to create the picture. The reason why that takes that much time is you don't have the primitive components, single variable primitive components in inventory before you start, so that you can create the picture on the fly. It takes you the click of a mouse to create a picture, and if you want 10 pictures, create 10 clicks.
Right.
So you're spending all your time creating a snapshot, taking an x-ray. You don't have any time left to diagnose the problem, and you couldn't even pose another solution even if you did diagnose the problem. So it's a pretty good metaphor. I like the metaphor. If you had the primitive component, it would be trivial. Now, I'll tell you what, most enterprises do not have the primitive components right now. But it doesn't even take that long to create the primitive components. It takes a lot shorter time to create the primitive components than take a whole bunch of variables and try to create a single composite picture. It takes a lot more time to try to figure out what the complex relationships are between a bunch of variables than it is to create the single variable components and then just define the relationship between them. It's tragic in a way.
So if I've seen that. If we have the enterprise primitives, we could create a very complex composites in less than few hours. And in fact, we have seen some of the cases where earlier we would spend 3 months in that assignment. Now we actually spend maybe 5 or 6 days to create those composites, right? So, I do see the value that one of the reason, one of the challenge that the enterprise architect community had was the existing techniques or methodologies or framework, whether they use it, they all are dealing with composites. So their ability to create a composite which is aimed at addressing a specific problem is a time-consuming step, and as a result they're not getting enough time to do the diagnosis and solution. But while if they use your framework as an ontology, and then they can create the primitives, and then from those primitives they can create the necessary composites for that analysis and gap analysis and impact analysis and stuff like that, and do the proper diagnosis, right? And that saves a lot of time for them.
Well, there's some the medical metaphor is really useful too, because For example, I mean, you can have one organic problem, one organ is a problem, or one bone is a problem, or one nerve is a problem, and it has multiple symptoms. You know, if you have a heart problem, you could have a blood pressure problem, you could have a memory problem because the blood circulation in the brain, you could have the muscles can atrophy. You can have a whole bunch of different problems. Well, if you look at a symptom, you know, you're just fixing the symptom. But if you fix the heart problem, you're fixing, you know, all the symptoms. Same thing happens in the enterprise. If you have a distribution problem, a column 3, row 2 problem, you fix the distribution problem, you may fix all kinds of problems in the enterprise. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to fix everything, but you fix one thing, and it has multiple impacts.
Right.
No, I mean, if you took a number of problems that you could identify and overlay them against the framework structure, you'll find different cells reoccurring in many different problems. If you fix any one cell, you're going to impact many problems. So that's, you know, that's the way that
So
would manifest itself.
so it's just like in medical science, medical practice, right? So what they do is you know, you have a set of, let's say, 300 human body disorders, and for each disorder you could actually map it back to which organs. Do you think something similar we could do with enterprise anatomy?
Yeah,
And
yeah, precisely.
possibly we could map to you know, with some cells in your framework. And do you think that kind of augment the whole process of create quick time or short time needed for creating enterprise x-rays and more time available for diagnosis solution? Do you think something similar coming up happening in our world?
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing about it is, once you address any one cell in the framework and begin to address that, not only will it affect maybe many different problems,
Oh, okay.
but you could pose many different prescriptions. You could create not one composite proposed solution, but you can create n different composite solutions, and then pick out which ones are probably going to be more effective than the others, and then much more rapidly address the physical problems. I mean, the medical metaphor is really a good metaphor.